Hello everyone. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about one of the important non-neoplastic inflammatory condition involving intestine, and that is inflammatory bowel disease. The group of inflammatory bowel disease includes two important conditions called ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Sometimes it is not be possible to differentiate on clinical basis as well as on morphology between these two conditions. We call them as indeterminate colitis. So ulcerative colitis is a non-specific inflammatory bowel disease of unknown etiology that affects mainly the mucosa of colon and rectum. Crohn's disease is similarly non-specific inflammatory bowel disease that may affect any segment of gastrointestinal tract. When it is not possible to differentiate between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease on clinical endoscopic and microscopic features, we call it as indeterminate colitis. About 15% of patients with IBD are indeterminate colitis. As such, the etiology of inflammatory bowel diseases is not very much known, and there are some factors which are thought to have role in the development of inflammatory bowel diseases. Okay, first is genetic factor. So there are some evidences which were studied, and depending on those evidences, it was thought that genetic factor plays a role in generation of this disease. So it was observed that there is an increase in incidence in first degree relatives who have IBD, a monozygotic twin who have IBD, the other twin have 50% chances to develop this disease. Disease predisposing loci were observed on chromosome 16q, 12p, 6p, 14q and 5q, particularly CRD15 on chromosome number 16q. There was an association of HLA-DRB1 seen with ulcerative colitis, and association of Crohn's disease was observed with HLA-DR7 and HLA-DQ4. So apart from genetic factors, one important factor is immunological factor. Okay, so normally, as you know, in our gut we have millions of bacteria. These bacteria are helping us in digestion of food. But why don't these bacteria cause disease in intestine? Because they are always there. It is because there is an immune suppression which happens with the help of CD4 cells, which prevents response to these bacteria which are present in the gut. But when there is an ineffective activation of CD4 cells, there is defective regulation of immune suppression for this bacteria, which can lead to development of IBD. You can also study that there is deletion of inflammatory inhibitory cytokines like interleukin 2, interleukin 10 or transforming growth factor beta, which inhibits the inflammation caused in the intestine, which is again defective in case of IBD. Also, molecular specific T cell recognition, which happens with the help of major histocompatibility complex 2, is also defective. There is interference with normal epithelial barrier function of intestine, which helps to keep the bacteria and the cellular environment different. So there is an barrier function defect which also happens to play role in development of IBD. So here T cells are very important. CD4 cells, T helper cells are very important. T helper 1 cell, they secrete pro-inflammatory cytokines like interferon gamma and tumor necrosis factor, which is responsible for transmural granulomatous inflammation in Crohn's disease. So as you know, T helper 1 cells are associated with Crohn's disease. Similarly, T helper 2 cells, which secretes interleukin 4, interleukin 5 and interleukin 13, they are specific for inducing superficial mucosal inflammation, which is seen with the ulcerative colitis. So here you can understand that the transmural granulomatous inflammation, which is peculiar for Crohn's disease, is associated with T helper 1 cell, whereas only superficial mucosal inflammation, which happens with the help of T helper 2 cell, is same with the ulcerative colitis. Next is microbial factors. So many microbes were thought to have role in the development of IBD, like even Salmonella, Shigella, tuberculosis. But this, if you say the overall incidence of IBD, it is very much common with the developed countries because their children are exposed with antibiotics at early age, and there is disturbance in gut flora which leads to development of IBD. Apart from microbial factors, there are some environmental factors. Patients who are taking NSAIDs for long time, they have increased incidence of IBD. Some psychological factors like people who are sensitive, dependents, they have stressful life. Sometimes it is seen associated with major life events. Okay. Smoking is seen associated with Crohn's disease, and oral contraceptives also happens to have increased risk with Crohn's disease. So, if you see all these factors, you would understand that there is not a single etiological agent. There are multiple factors. Okay, and there is interlinking of all these multiple factors, and all these play role in development of inflammatory bowel disease. So we'll start with the first important condition, that is ulcerative colitis. Okay, both these conditions, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, are important as far as your exam is concerned. In theory, you can get a clinical based question, the diagnosis of which could be ulcerative Crohn's. You can get a full question on either of these diseases. You can get short note on morphological appearances. You can even be asked about the differences between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So it is very important for you to understand uh, basic morphology and differences between ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So how common is ulcerative colitis? You can see it is very much common in the US and Northern Europe, where you can see 8 to 15 cases per million, and you can even encounter 7 to 46,000 new cases in United States. As far as India is concerned, here also we encountered lot of cases of ulcerative colitis. The peak incidence is in third decade to seventh decade. There is a slight male preponderance. As we discussed before, there are some risk factors, though etiology is not very specific or not very known. There are some risk factors thought are cigarette smoking, genetics, because 5 to 10% of those affected patients, they have a positive family history for ulcerative colitis. Now, what are the macroscopic features of this disease? Okay, as the name suggests, ulcerative colitis. So there would be ulceration, right? And colitis is involvement or inflammation of colon. So you will see ulcerations in the colon. These ulcers are typically limited to mucosa and submucosa. That is, they are very superficial. It always starts from rectum and then spreads proximally. So superficial ulcers involving mucosa and submucosa of rectum is the classic feature of ulcerative colitis. Okay, it starts distally, that is from rectum, and it involves the proximal colon slowly. Later, it can involve descending, transverse and ascending colon. You call it as pancolitis, and it can also involve the distal part of ileum. Though it commonly does not involve small intestine, in 10% of the cases, it can involve the ileum, and you call it as backwash ileitis. So here the ileum will be dilated, okay, and you can notice that on radiology as well, and it will be narrow fibrosed ileum in Crohn's disease. So that is the difference between these two. We will be discussing this in Crohn's disease as well. But remember, why I'm telling you this here is because Ileum is a common site where Crohn's disease is encountered, but very rarely, in 10% of the cases, you can encounter ulcerative colitis in ileum where it will be difficult to differentiate. So in that case, on radiology, you can differentiate between these two conditions where there is narrow fibrosed ileum in Crohn's disease and dilated ulcerated ileum in ulcerative colitis backwash ileitis. On endoscopy, here you can see a picture on right side. There are multiple, the reddish things which you can see are ulcers. There are numerous ulcers with heaped up regenerative mucosa in between. Okay, so as you know, if there is an ulcer, there will be regeneration, there will be granulation tissue. So you can see that the mucosa in between the ulcer is heaped up, it is kind of swollen, which looks like a polyp. So it will give pseudo polyp appearance on the mucosa. Okay, as we discussed, the ulcers are superficial. You can even see superficial fissures, and there is loss of normally visualized endoscopic vascular pattern, which is very peculiar with IBD. And this is how gastroenterologist identifies that it is inflammatory bowel disease, because there is a loss of normal endoscopic vascular pattern. So here nicely you can see this pseudo polyp appearance of ulcerative colitis, where you can see the edematous mucosa in between, which is seen elevated in the lumen of the colon, and this is not a true polyp. Okay, it is just granulation tissue or heaped up mucosa. So this is pseudo polyp appearance of the ulcerative colitis. So microscopically, again, there are important features which you should remember. So as we have studied, it is an inflammatory condition, right? So it is going to cause inflammation of the normal structure of the colon. So you have crypts normally in the intestine, and there will be inflammation of these crypts. So there will be cryptitis, and when this cryptitis becomes severe, it leads to crypt abscess. So you can see that polymorphs are infiltrating the crypts of Leberkin at mucosal base, and they form crypt abscesses. Sometimes there is a superficial desquamation of epithelium leading to ulcer formation, so it is a cryptitis. The undermined adjacent mucosa is become edematous, which is seen on endoscopy as pseudopolyp. Muscularis propria may undergo myocytolysis, causing hyperemia and wall thinning. If you see microscopically here, on the left side there is a colonic mucosa where these crypts are parallel to each other, they are well spaced. Okay, there is not much of inflammation, they are properly based on muscularis mucosa parallel to each other. Okay, and on right side you can see that the architecture is totally distorted. There are unevenly spaced crypts, there is inflammation of crypts. You can see the lamina propria, which is this soft tissue which is present between these crypts, is expanded, and there is inflammation. There is also ulceration, which is evident on the surface. So here is one more microscopic picture where you can see the lamina propria is expanded because of inflammation by lymphocytes, plasma cells. You can see eosinophils. There is crypt abscess, that is this round crypt is inflamed, and there is infiltration of inflammatory cells in the center. There is cryptitis, that is this is on the right side. This is an abnormally shaped crypt where you can see which is containing mucin. There are some goblet cells. The number of goblet cells is also decreased as a reactive change. There is inflammation of these crypts. You can see inflammatory cell infiltrate, that is neutrophil, which is destroying the crypt epithelium. So here nicely you can notice a crypt abscess. There is a crypt, and in the center there are inflammatory cells. So this is crypt abscess, and on left side you can see there is cryptitis. The half of the crypt is destroyed by inflammatory cells, so it is cryptitis. So clinically, how these patients do present? So majority of the patients, they have a mild or disease which involves the distal colon. Okay, only the rectum will be involved or ascending colon. That is, proctitis is seen in up to 40% of the patients. Left-sided colitis, that is in involvement of the descending colon up to splenic flexure, is seen in 35% of the cases. So here you can notice that majority of the patients have a mild disease. These patients clinically present with urgency, frequency and tenuousness, and on digital rectal examination you will see that there is a blood and mucus on the fingers. On anoproctoscopy you can see there is inflamed mucosa, and about 10% of the cases they progress to pancolitis, that is involvement of whole colon. About 20% of the patients, as I said, they can have pancolitis, which is a severe form of disease. These patients will have anemia, fatigue, anorexia, weight loss. When it becomes long-term disease, when it becomes chronic colitis, you will even see loss of mucosal folds, loss of obstructions. You can even get a lead pipe appearance on radiograph. Okay, there is one complication called as toxic megacolon, where there is dilatation and loss of tone of colon. So this is a very dreadful complication where patient can undergo septicemia and septic shock. These patients will have fever, pain in abdomen, tachycardia. There is a focal tenderness. There is leukocytosis on peripheral smear. And radiologically, you will see dilatation of the colon more than 6 centimeter. That is the diameter of the colon. There is a risk of gangrene and perforation because there is loss of tone, and the wall of the colon is very weak. So these patients quite commonly they present with perforation. Okay, this was regarding toxic megacolon, which is a complication of ulcerative colitis. So there are some extraintestinal manifestations which are seen with ulcerative colitis. So here you can see that ulcerative colitis is not a disease involving only the colon. Okay, so in the etiology we had studied that there is immunological factor involved in the development of inflammatory bowel disease. So with this extraintestinal manifestations, we can even prove that theory that there is generalized etiology, or uh, there is systemic involvement associated with ulcerative colitis. You can see arthritis commonly involving knees, ankle, hips and shoulders in about 20% of the patients. It is typically seen with increased activity of intestinal disease. So when patient have symptomatic intestinal disease, there is increased arthritis. Ankylosing spondylitis is seen in about 3 to 5% of the patient. In these patients, there is association of HLA-B27, which you know that there is an association of ankylosing spondylitis with that. Erythema nodosum is in about 10 to 15% of the patients, often in conjunction with arthropathy. Pyoderma gangrenosum, which is quite rare, and it is associated with IBD in about 50% of the cases. Primary sclerosing cholangitis is seen about 5 to 8% of the cases. It is commonly seen with men who are younger than 40 years. There is an association with HLA-B8 or HLA-DR3. Okay, when there is an association with this, they have almost 10% more risk for development of primary sclerosing cholangitis. This colitis in these patients is more quiescent. Okay, so patient might present with primary sclerosing cholangitis, and then on investigation you can find that the patient is having ulcerative colitis later. The development of colon carcinoma is increased in 5 times compared to ulcerative colitis alone. As you know, it is one of the complication, or for development of colon carcinoma, ulcerative colitis is one of the risk factors. and as you know, liver transplant is needed for the cure. How do we diagnose ulcerative colitis? So that, before labeling any patient as ulcerative colitis, we definitely have to rule out infectious disease, because some of the morphological features like cryptitis are seen with infective colitis as well. So it is very important to rule out the infective causes, and infective causes are obviously a, a way lot common than that of ulcerative colitis. Then confirm the inflammatory origin to diarrhea, urgency, etc. by doing stool cultures. You search for ova or parasite, that is, you obviously rule out the infectious causes. Other infectious causes which can give you similar picture, clinical picture or endoscopic picture like ulcerative colitis are Campylobacter, Salmonella, Shigella and Clostridium difficile. Then you can further, after ruling out infectious causes, you can also advise proctosigmoidoscopy, where you can see diffuse confluent disease, okay, from dentate line and involving uh, uh, colon, okay, proximal to that of dentate line. So you will start from rectum and you will see that it is starting from rectum and involving the proximal colon. Also, if there is involvement of small bowel, then you have to rule out Crohn's disease. Okay. In case of indeterminate colitis, we have to treat it as ulcerative colitis if it is not definitely Crohn's disease. So, as I said, ulcerative colitis is one of the risk factors for adenocarcinoma of colon. When the disease becomes very long duration, then there is increase in the risk to develop carcinoma. So risk increases to almost 65% if the person is living with the ulcerative colitis for almost 40 years. If it is a pancolonic disease, then left-sided only patients are rarely developing cancer than that of pancolitis. Okay, so that says that if the disease is very extensive, if it is involving the right colon as well, then there is increased risk of ulcerative colitis. When the disease is continuously active, so there is damage, there is repair, so obviously these patients have high risk to develop carcinoma. When there is increase in the severity of inflammation, then these patients have increased risk to develop carcinoma. So in case of ulcerative colitis, if there is colonic stricture, then you have to definitely rule out the colonic carcinoma. So how do we treat ulcerative colitis? Okay, so medical therapy, we give certain medications like aminosalicylates, like sulfasalazine or mesalamine. Corticosteroids are also given to suppress the inflammation like prednisone. Some immunomodulatory agents are also being tried like 6-MP and azathioprine. They inhibit proliferation of T lymphocytes more than B lymphocytes. So as we have seen that T lymphocytes have important role in development of inflammatory bowel disease. But these medications are toxic. They can cause bone marrow suppression and even pancreatitis. Cyclosporins are again immunomodulatory agents. They can inhibit interleukin 2 gene transcription and they can lead to nephro or hepatotoxicity. Surgical treatment is also considered in ulcerative colitis, but only in certain conditions, indicated conditions. So when there are debilitating symptoms, there are complications of steroid therapy, and there are extracolonic manifestations. That is, the disease has not been controlled with medications. Then that intractability of disease is an indication for surgery. So these patients are or posted for surgery. When there is dysplasia, which you can notice on endoscopic biopsies, these patients have high risk to develop carcinomas, right? So to prevent the development of carcinoma, you can remove that part of colon. When there is a massive colonic bleeding through the ulcers, you can do subtotal colectomy. sick, and if proctectomy is done only if bleeding is refractory. If it is a toxic megacolon, then total abdominal colectomy with ileostomy is performed. So, what are the surgeries for ulcerative colitis? You can do segmental colectomy, abdominal colectomy with ileorectal anastomosis, total proctocolectomy with ileostomy, total proctocolectomy with continent ileostomy, total proctocolectomy with ileal pouch anal anastomosis. Okay, so that was all about ulcerative colitis. Now we are going to discuss the second important disease, which is Crohn's disease. So about 1 to 5 cases per million population in United States and Northern Europe have ulcerative colitis. They have a bimodal age incidence. First is a younger population, 15 to 30 years. Later peak is in little elderly patients, which is 55 to 60 years. It is common in whites than blacks and Asians, but still we have in India we do have a lot of cases of Crohn's disease. Immigrants from low incidence countries show increase in risk for Crohn's disease to the native population. That is where they have moved in the new place uh, because of potent environmental influences. So, for development of Crohn's disease, with this evidence, we can say that there is a role of environmental factors. So, considering the etiological factors for Crohn's disease, there are theories which are thought, which are associated with development of the disease. Is first is response to a specific infectious agent. Okay, we'll discuss that. A defective mucosal barrier allowing an increased exposure to antigen. So those antigens could be bacteria. When there is an abnormal host response to dietary antigens. So all these things are just thought to be causing or to be having a role in development of Crohn's disease. Mycobacterium paratuberculosis, which is a bacteria, is isolated in up to 65% of tissue samples from Crohn's disease. So it was thought that this infectious agent has a little role in development of Crohn's disease, but it is not an infective condition. As I said before, it is an inflammation. So Mycobacterium paratuberculosis is not causing so it is not a tuberculosis of Crohn's disease, right? Smoking also appears to have increased risk in Crohn's disease, and the risk of recurrence is also increased in smokers. So, how is the gross appearance? You can see multiple strictures with thickened colon wall, and there are skip lesions. Okay, you can see that ileum is also involved in Crohn's disease. So that the typical gross appearance is strictures. You can see a lot of strictures at multiple sites. Okay, on the right side you can see a picture of the colon where you can see multiple strictures at different sites. Okay, or on endoscopy you will see cobblestone appearance because of these strictures. The in between mucosa appears like a cobblestone. So this is very peculiar with the Crohn's disease. The bowel wall may entirely encase by creeping fat of mesentery, and these strictures may develop in small and large intestine. So what is creeping of fat? Here you can see compared to normal intestine on the left side. On the right side, the wall is thickened. You can see fissuring ulcers. You can see fissures, deep ulcers which can traverse through not just the mucosa and submucosa but even the muscularis propria up to serosa. Okay, we have seen that in ulcerative colitis it is just a mucosa and submucosa involved. So ulcers are very superficial, but that doesn't happen with Crohn's disease. Here there is thickening of the wall. There are these deep fissuring ulcers. There is cobblestone-like intestinal surface, which is seen with the Crohn's disease. The fat is seen wrapped around this involved segment of intestine, okay, which is also very important feature of Crohn's disease. On cut section, you will see that mucosa is showing long, deep, linear ulcers, and ulcerative colitis, they were superficial. But here in Crohn's disease, the ulcers are long, they are deep and linear. So these kind of ulcers give you appearance of railroad track or bear claws. So normal mucosa which may intervene between the areas of inflammation are appearing normal. So these are called as skip areas. Okay, so skip areas is again characteristic of Crohn's disease. In ulcerative colitis, there is a continuous involvement, but in Crohn's disease, there are, you can see that there are strictures in between, there are ulcers in between, long deep linear ulcers in between, and the intermediate mucosa appears normal, which are called as skip lesions. Microscopically, as we have seen, there are deep ulcers. So you can see that there are deep fissuring ulcers which are not just limited to mucosa, but they can even go or cross through the muscularis propria. There is a transmural inflammation. Again, this is very important. There is inflammation involving the whole wall of intestine, not just the mucosa or submucosa. It is mucosa, submucosa, muscularis propria and serosa. Everything is inflamed in Crohn's disease. You can see submucosal edema, you can even see lymphoid aggregates and fibrosis involving all the layers. Okay. Microscopically, one important feature of Crohn's disease which you should remember is non-caseating granulomas. Okay, so here you will think, okay, granulomas are a feature of tuberculosis, but as you know, it is not specific for tuberculosis. In Crohn's disease also you can see granulomas, and these granulomas are specifically non-caseating, so there is no caseous necrosis. If you see caseous necrosis, then you have to keep tuberculosis as your differential diagnosis, because in India we have lot of cases of abdominal tuberculosis where you can see similar kind of transverse ulcers, strictures, thickened wall in intestine. You have studied that in the chapter tuberculosis. So it becomes difficult to diagnose a case of Crohn's disease or tuberculosis only based on granulomas, because you know in both the conditions you can see granulomas, but caseation is only seen with tuberculosis and it is not seen with Crohn's disease. The granulomas are localized. These are well formed aggregates of epithelioid cells surrounded by lymphocytes and giant cells, and they can be seen in all the layers of intestine. It is seen in almost 50% of resected specimens. So here, this is kind of mnemonic for you to remember a feature of Crohn's. It is only girls can be having Crohn's. Granulomatous, G for granulomatous, A for all, L for layers, and S for skip lesions. So girls, granulomatous, all layers, and skip lesions is a feature of Crohn's. So here is a microscopic picture. You can see that there is a deep fissuring ulcer which is pointed out with the arrow. So it is going deep into the wall of intestine surrounded by a lot of inflammation. There is a transmural inflammation. Here you can see in the lower part the mucosa is intact, but in upper part there is inflammation. You can even see lymphoid follicles on the right side of the picture, which is serosa. So there is transmural involvement. Here is the picture of non-caseating granuloma present in the mucosa of the colon, which is characteristic of Crohn's disease. Remember, there is no caseation. These are non-caseating granulomas which are typical for Crohn's disease. So how these patients present clinically? They present with a typical triad of abdominal pain, diarrhea and weight loss. They also have anorexia, fever, recurrent aphthous ulcers. Patient with family history, they typically present with more extensive disease. So here you can have some genetic association. About half of the patients with Crohn's disease have rectal involvement, and two-thirds have involvement of entire colon. So remember this. So in these patients, you need to differentiate it properly from ulcerative colitis. So anal diseases is these are common with Crohn's disease. So anal involvement is seen in form of anal fistulas, fissures, strictures, and edematous skin tags. So as we have studied in Crohn's disease, it is a fistulous kind of ulcer. So anal fistulas are common in Crohn's disease. Okay, so it is the rectum which is involved in ulcerative colitis, but anal fistulas or fissures or ulcers are seen with the Crohn's disease. So this anal involvement is commonly seen uh, in uh, uh, in patients with terminal ileal disease in 30% of the patients and 50% of the patients with colonic disease. How do we diagnose Crohn's disease? So like ulcerative colitis, first you have to rule out infectious causes because these are very common than that of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. You have to differentiate it from ulcerative colitis as well, and you have to search for extracolonic involvement. Like in Crohn's disease, you have oral involvement and anal involvement common than that of ulcerative colitis. The characteristic radiological findings are important. You can see there are skip lesions, that is in between the intestine is normal. There are contour defects because of the strictures, longitudinal and transverse ulcers, cobblestone like mucosal pattern because in between also the mucosa is normal, giving cobblestone like appearance. There are strictures, there is thickening of hostile margins and irregular nodular defects. So all these radiological findings will favor the diagnosis of Crohn's disease. How do we treat this Crohn's disease? So there are certain drugs like aminosalicylates, sulfasalazine or mesalazine. You can also give corticosteroids to suppress the inflammation. Immunomodulatory drugs, as we discussed, like azathioprine, 6-MP or cyclosporine. Infliximab is a monoclonal antibody which blocks tumor necrosis factor alpha. Is also been tried in the medical therapy, and it leads to decrease in the inflammation because it is an inflammatory condition. So obviously, decrease in the inflammation will help the patient. Intravenous infusion to treat Crohn's disease in steroid dependent patients or intractable patients, that is patients which are not responsive to these steroids, you can give infliximab. So again, like ulcerative colitis, when the patients are intractable to medical line of therapy, these patients are indicated for surgery. So with debilitating disease and refractory medical treatment, you have to treat the patients with surgery. Intestinal obstruction can, these patients, as we have seen, these patients present with strictures, so they can present with acute intestinal obstruction. So in that case also you need to opt for surgery. So what are the causes of intestinal obstruction? Because there is an active inflammation, there is fibrotic stricture from a chronic disease, you can even have an abscess causing mass effect, or there is adhesion from previous abdominal surgery. So all these factors can have intestinal obstruction in Crohn's disease. When there is an intra-abdominal abscess, because these patients with Crohn's disease, they have fissuring kind of ulcers. So these deep fissuring ulcers can involve pelvic organs or abdominal organs where there will be accumulation of inflammation and abscess formation. Okay, so these intra-abdominal abscesses need to be operated. Fistulas are need to be operated as well. Up to 35% of the patients who develop fistulas, and most commonly this is small intestinal fistulas. So iliosigmoid fistula is very common. So we need to operate these patients by fistulectomy. So enterocutaneous fistulas can also be developed because these are very deep ulcers. So they can also open on the skin. Like if there is an anal involvement, there can be cutaneous fistula involving anus. So these patients are treated with surgery by fistulectomy. When uh, there is an involvement of entire bowel wall, it leads to fulminant colitis. Uh, fulminant colitis is a colitis which is short duration and with very high severity. So here there is a colonic dilatation, like how it happens with the toxic megacolon. It is not very common with Crohn's disease, but it is common with ulcerative colitis. And toxicity of the colitis toxicity of the colitis is not less severe. Similar to the case of toxic megacolon in ulcerative colitis, treatment is obviously the subtotal colectomy with end ileostomy. If there is a massive bleeding because of those deep-fissurating ulcers, then again you have to treat with surgery, but it is not very common. It is the bleeding complication is commonly seen with the ulcerative colitis. Terminal ileum is the most common site, okay, for this massive bleeding. The development of adenocarcinoma is seen in case of Crohn's disease as well, but not as much that of ulcerative colitis. So if you consider the risk of development of adenocarcinoma, it is very much high with that of ulcerative colitis than that of Crohn's disease. You can see that the this Crohn's disease, if it affects young patients, they have impaired growth and mental development due to prolonged inadequate calorie intake, and there is resection and you can get resection of severely diseased segment, and you can help that patient to regain the growth. There are some elective surgeries which can be done with in case of Crohn's disease, like ileocecal resection or total abdominal colectomy with ileorectal anastomosis. Proctectomy can also be done, and segmental colon resections are also done in case of Crohn's disease. So that was all about ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, which is in the group of inflammatory bowel diseases. So you need to understand the basic etiopathogenesis and morphology of these diseases, and try to understand the clinical presentation, because you can get a clinical based question, and also prepare the differences between these two, which is going to be um, your assignment for this lecture. Thank you.